Hey everybody, Nick here, and this morning we're going to do a little disassembly on this big guy here. This is the Chris Reeve Knives Sebenza 25. It's an interesting knife. It's sort of a modernized, I don't know if modernized is the right term, but it's a new revision of the Chris Reeve Knives Sebenza 21. And it's kind of interesting. This particular unit was purchased by my buddy Dennis, who sent it along for review. Thank you, Dennis. But unfortunately, it was purchased, he got it on the eBay, and the seller, was just not very good. Didn't explain, for instance, that this screw here is stripped out. And as you can see from looking at these screws, it has been drowned in some sort of a thread locker in the past. Taking this guy apart originally was absolutely a pain in the neck. I did it the first time off camera just to make sure. So that's a little bit ugly. Actually, that's deeply, deeply ugly. So I'm going to try and take this guy down here. And it's got a free spinning pivot here, which you can see. And so hopefully I'll be able to get it out with one side, but we'll see. This is always quicker if I can. Yeah, there we go. So we're popping this guy free. So you can see here, this has a much larger pivot than the original Sebenza. And in fact, the entire interior mechanism is very different than the original Sebenza. So, than the Sebenza 21, the original Sebenza being something slightly different. And in fact, just for demonstration, I've got a Sebenza 21 down here at the bottom, so I can give you a little bit of a tour of some of those differences. One of the big differences is the pivot itself. The pivot on this guy sticks up a good deal further, and there's no bushing surrounding the blade, as opposed to on the 21 here. Pop this open. You can see that the blade rides on this little bushing right here, which allows the blade to rotate around that, and also means that on the 21 you can crank, and in fact you should just crank it down as much as you can, reasonably, and it'll be at the perfect tension. As opposed to on the 25, the tension of the pivot screw really controls the action of the knife. Similarly, you'll also notice that the 25 here, the stop pin up here is, it's not symmetrical. You need to make sure that the stop pin is rotated in the proper position in order for this to work. And on the 21, that's not the case. This is just a round stop pin. You don't have to worry about that sort of an affair. A couple of other small differences. On the 21, you're using Chicago screws. Where is that guy? Right here. Whereas on the 25, you're actually using something more like a standoff sort of an affair. You can see here, this has been machined out. And then finally, the washers themselves are different. You can see here on the 25, at least on the lock side, there's a larger washer that's got a cutout for it and actually a little tab that sticks into this little hole, as opposed to on the Sebenza 21, come on. Take this off, you can see that it just uses a much smaller washer on the other side. And so those are some of the differences between the 25 and the 21. We'll put the 21 aside for the moment with all of its component parts and go back to the 25. But you can see that, like I said, they've made a bunch of changes here between these two knives. Some for better, some for worse. This knife is not particularly dirty because I've just cleaned it out, but I'll go ahead and show you the process regardless. One of the big difference here you can see is the detent ball. I'll pull the 21 body back over here. On the regular Sebenza, the 21, you've got a little tiny ball that's inset here, as opposed to on this guy, where the detent ball is this large ceramic ball, which also serves as the lock face and lock bar insert, if you will, on the knife, which is interesting and a little bit different. It's a little unusual, at least relative to your 21. So that's another big difference you've got going on there. Just cleaning this guy out here. I'll re-oil and re-grease everything because why not? Getting ready for the review. The 25 is very interesting to me as a knife just because it's a variation on something that that I like rather a lot, the large 21. And I don't necessarily understand why some of these changes were made. Using some rubbing alcohol here just to cut some of this grease and clean things off. A lot of people really enjoy the 21's action, and the 25 is, it's a little bit different in that way. So, yeah, you add a little bit of fiddliness, but you also get some customizability. One of the big changes is that you can tweak the pivot tension a little bit to make sure, sorry about the heat coming on there, but to make sure that it's acting just the way that you want it to. Which is nice. It can make this into a much flickier knife. Please don't kill me, Chris Reeve. Chris Reeve hates when you flick his knives open for whatever reason. He gets all triggered by that, and that's a little unpleasant. But hey, whatever. Just cleaning out this, you can see that the hole here in the blade is just a hole. There's no detent ball inset or anything like that. They just drilled a hole in the blade. Why not? So there you go. Having this washer be a little bit bigger on the other side is probably not a bad thing. I mean, larger washers provide a little bit more support. It does make this knife a little bit more fiddly because you have to make sure that this little tab here on the washer is in the proper position. It's not very difficult to do, though, so we're just going to do it. And let's see here. I think we're all set here and good to go. Yeah. Clean this out. It really is a shame what my buddy got here from the eBay. This is one of the warnings, one of the dangers, that is, of buying knives sight unseen online, especially on sites like eBay. You can very easily get knives with stripped out screws, with heavy Loctite. You just don't know what you're getting into, and that's unfortunate. I'm actually going to see if I can. Where is my little tool? This is a little watch spring bar repair tool. Oh, come on, you little bugger. It's currently at the bottom of my... There we go. Yeah. This is a nice little tool to have for a bunch of different things, but what I'm going to try and do is remove a little bit of this extra thread locker here. Just clear it up a little, because it's still a bit of a struggle to get these screws in and out. And as a result, I'm not going to use Loctite on anything but the pivot on this guy. That is one other change. By moving to this style of pivot, where it's not always locked all the way in, you now need to use a little bit of Loctite on the pivot to keep it in the position you've dialed in. Again, this is the trade-off of customizability versus... one-size-fits-all excellence, if you will. But, that's life. So, let's go ahead and put this guy back together. Nice, short, and sweet video here. We drop this washer into place. Next thing I'm going to do is, because the washer cannot spin against the backside here, I don't need to put grease particularly underneath the washer. But what I'm going to do is take some nano grease here. This is by the same folks who make nano oil. And I'm just going to use my little oiler here as a scoop and put a little bit of the grease. Oh, come on now. Put a little bit of the grease on top of here. Try not to over-grease it too much. I'm still going to over-grease it because, let's face it, I'm the Nick Shabazz. But anyways... And really, the way that you use this knife is going to really affect how you want to lubricate it. This knife could be run in a very flicky way, and to do that, you'd probably use a fairly low viscosity sort of oil, like your 10-weight nano oil. But here, I'm trying to do something a little bit more intermediate, where it is flicky enough. But, yeah. And it's kind of a shame that I didn't do the first assembly on camera, because the grease that was in here, the Chris Reeve grease, was absolutely... It was like dry and cakey. It was ugly, deeply, deeply ugly. Now I'm just using a little bit of 85-weight nano oil. This is the thick stuff, in order to provide a little bit of extra alongside that grease, which, I tend to like the action of the grease and the oil mixed up. Not a huge deal, but it is that. And then I'm going to put a little bit of, see, that's the unfortunate part about this little tabby arrangement here, is that... Actually, I'll just use the washer to distribute a little bit of grease there. But anyways, that's the unfortunate part of the tab arrangement, is that it's very easy for the washer to come back up if you move the blade, and then the washer may not seat itself. So you need to make very, very sure, as you do in this reassembly, that the washer is seated with that little tab in the little hole, or else you're going to have a bad time. So that's nice. Well, not so nice, actually. This washer, on the other hand, is free rotating. So... just going to put a little grease down here. Actually, come to think of it, I'm going to put a little bit around the pivot itself, and again, the washer lifts off. What a joy. So just coating the inside of the pivot there a little bit, and again just using a little drop of nano oil, yeah, the heavyweight stuff. There we go. The tab is back in, so it's good to go. Now I drop this on here. I'll put a little more. Why not, right? Yeah, and then I got a little bit on the pivot. I'll try and scrape it off here. What I'm going to do is set the washer down, kind of distribute some of the grease. Then I'm actually going to lift it back off and then flip it over. That way I've already greased the other side. Come on now. Let's see. Oh, come on. Really? There we go. Use a little bit more here. It's got these nice big pockets to allow the grease to stick around. And I happen to, you know, my buddy Dennis, who sent it along, doesn't seem to be a big disassembler, so, you know, just give him enough that it'll last for a little while. A couple of drops of nano oil in here, just to thin the action out a little bit, and I'll just rotate the whole affair. There we go. That's nice enough. Beautiful. Now what we can do is drop the other scale on. One advantage to this approach, so on the Sebenza 21 here, I'll try and kind of put it back together a little bit. On the Sebenza 21, it's very important that your washers be in the right alignment if you're rebuilding it in this sort of a stacked method, because otherwise you can crimp your washers and have a bad time. And that's no good. In fact, that's pretty ugly. So you need to make sure that the washer is perfectly centered around the around that little bushing in there. Well, like I said, you'll have an issue. On the 25, though, that's not an issue because you can see here that the pivot is sticking up a good ways above the washer. So there's not really a concern. All you need to do is just drop the whole thing, drop the whole scale, that is, back onto the knife itself, and, well, next thing you know, you're back together. You have no real concern about, oh, come on now. Unfortunately, this guy's a little bit fiddly in getting everything snapped back into place. There you go. So one thing that you might run into is if this stop pin rotates up here, you will no longer be able to fully open and close the knife. There's a little area that's flattened off that needs to be in the right position in order for the clearances to work out for the knife to open and close. You know, it's not something I'm a big fan of personally, but if you're unable to close or open your knife after you put it back together, that's what happened. You messed that little part up. So there you go. Let's go ahead and put this the rest of the way back together. So it is nice that that one failure mode of accidentally pinching the washer is not present here. And it removes the need for that sort of integral approach to reassembling it that folks like the Apostle P recommend on the Sebenza 21. Actually, that doesn't work at all here because you'd need to put the washer in because of that damn tab. So, yeah, tighten these handle screws down. Now relieve the lock bar tension, put this back in here. And we're going to use a little bit of Loctite here. Just the blue stuff, never red. Red is evil. There's a reason that the devil is red in most mythologies. There we go. It's all related to Loctite. Just doing one more check to make sure we can see here the little tab for the washer is in the right position. Beautiful. Make sure everything is threaded properly. Oh, come on. Why is this? There we go. Okay. So right now, as it is, I've got it all the way tight, and it is too tight, 100%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back off that pivot just a little bit here, and we'll see what that makes the action like. No blade play here. Very smooth. Not quite flicky yet, although with a little bit of wrist. And see, if I back this tension off even further, what I can end up with is an action that is, you know, very almost falsetty. Didn't quite get the flick right that time. There we go. And actually borderline flicky still without any blade play. I'm going to go ahead and dial it into a middle ground here because I just don't know what my buddy Dennis exactly wants out of his knife. But I'll bring it back to the rough area where it was for him, which allows you to flick a little bit if you want to. Use a little bit of wrist. Sorry there, Chris Reeve. Has zero blade play and is still very, very smooth, although it's a different flavor of smoothness in many ways. So there you go. That's your Sebenza 25. It's disassembled, it's maintained, it's happy now. We've seen some of the comparisons and differences with the 21, and it is very much a different knife on the inside. And yeah, hopefully this was interesting. Keep an eye out for the full review coming up soon. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.